Hello and thank you for subscribing to my channel Infowars Tech. Today we will be looking at Module 2 of Enterprise Virtualization with VMware. After completion of this module, we should have a good understanding of VMware virtualization technology and components. And as we complete this module, we should have good understanding of virtual infrastructure and be in a position to compare physical and virtual infrastructures. So let's get started. When we talk about ESXi hypervisor or the vSphere ecosystem, we talk about a number of components that enable us to run our servers in a virtualized environment. If you look at on the top of this picture, we have the web client and vSphere client that allow management of the virtual infrastructure, and we have the vCenter server, which is a management server and provides a single point of contact for all of the virtual infrastructure. We also have vSphere APIs, programmable interfaces. We also provide VCLI, command line interface for scripting purposes, and you also have hardware management agents running. Looking at the big rectangle in the middle, we notice that we have the physical infrastructure components, including CPU, memory, network, and storage, and we have 5 virtual machines shown here. The key here is the VM kernel, which is the operating system that is installed as part of the ESXi installation, which is the virtualization layer and manages access between the virtual machines and the underlying hardware. So as we'll see in the next slide, how this is achieved. So when we talk about the virtual resources, they include CPU, memory, network, and storage. And as shown in this picture, you have the actual hardware components, including CPU, memory, network, and storage, which are on the ESXi hardware host. And then once we deploy these virtual machines, as shown in this picture, we have 3 virtual machines. For each virtual machine, it will have a virtual NIC, virtual memory, virtual storage, and virtual network, and all of them actually map to the underlying hardware that is on that particular host. So when we talk about virtualizing, the VM kernel helps us to map between the actual physical resources on the host and the virtual machines. Now let's compare physical and virtual machines. So when you talk about a physical architecture, you typically have hardware, you have a host or a server, you have a single operating system, and you're deploying a single or multiple applications. It still uses the CPU, memory, and network and storage that comes with that hardware, but we can see that it may be underutilized or not that efficient. When we compare it to a virtual architecture, you can probably use the same hardware. However, in this case, we can now deploy, due to virtualization, with the beauty of virtualization, we can now deploy multiple operating systems. So as shown in this picture, instead of one operating system, I can now deploy 3 operating systems running independently of each other, and thereby increasing the utilization of that hardware. So that's one of the key benefits of virtualization, that you are able to have a better utilization of your hardware. So let's take a little deeper look. So in the top picture, we see x86 hardware with the hardware components that we mentioned earlier, and you have a single operating system, Windows shown in this case, and you're running one application or multiple applications. When you start the process of virtualization, we virtualize that server, and it shows up as a single virtual machine running on this ESXi virtualized hardware. Eventually, by the end of our virtualization process, we now have 6 virtual machines running. 4 of them are running Windows, 1 of them is running Linux, and 1 of them is running Solaris. All of them are running independently of each other. They are not interfering with each other, and you have greatly increased the capacity and the utilization of that underlying hardware. And that is one of the biggest benefits of virtualization. So let's compare physical versus virtual. So in the case of a physical machine, it's difficult to move or copy, which is evident because it's something that's tangible. It's bound to specific hardware. So once the hardware becomes obsolete, we either have to upgrade or maybe have a new system. It has a short life cycle. That life cycle is dependent on the underlying hardware, and you require physical contact if you want to make any changes. So if I want to upgrade or I want to change the memory, I have to have somebody to actually open up the box and make those changes. On the other hand, a virtual machine is easier to move and copy. Why? Because of the virtualization abstraction, where the virtual machine is just a bunch of files. Since they are encapsulated as files, we can now move them around, maybe copy them on a USB and take them to another location. It becomes independent of the underlying physical hardware. It becomes easier to manage. It is insulated from any hardware changes. So if I was to upgrade my hardware, the VMs would automatically get the benefit, and they will see more underlying, a more powerful hardware than previously. It provides the ability to support legacy applications. So with the newer drivers and the new hardware, you can still run older applications that were not able to run on previously obsolete hardware. And it allows servers to be consolidated. This is again a huge benefit of virtualization, where I might be running 100 physical boxes, and by virtue of virtualization I can reduce that or condense that into, or consolidate that into just 10 boxes. So I'm paying less for my data center, less on cooling or heating, and less personnel to manage those servers. When we look at a typical physical infrastructure, we have these physical boxes, and they're connected to storage. When they connect via Ethernet, the network attached storage, you can have access to iSCSI or NFS or network attached storage, and you can also have a dedicated storage via fiber channel. The physical infrastructure is, as we know, we have a physical host, we have a single operating system, and we may be running one application or multiple applications. When we compare this with the virtual infrastructure, what doesn't change is still the virtual infrastructure is able to access storage, whether it's over network or whether it's dedicated fiber channel. But what has really changed is the physical boxes are now replaced with maybe a more powerful box with ESXi virtualization layer, allowing us to run multiple operating systems and a greater deal of applications. So immediately, if we compare both physical and virtual, it's evident that it can be a drop-in replacement, as the underlying access to the storage does not change. So a huge plus point for virtualizing our infrastructure. So thank you for watching. Do subscribe to my channel, and I will be following up with module 3, and hopefully you've learned the basics of virtualization and how virtualization can benefit an organization by saving it in terms of money and people who are managing a smaller but more powerful virtual infrastructure. Thank you for watching.